This video contains discussions of suicide and disordered eating. Viewer discretion is advised. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 is considered the inciting incident of World War I. But do you know about the role this mask played in starting the war? Who wore this mask? Why did they wear it? And why was it so historically important? Let's put on our partas, plan our parade routes, and find out. Let me start this video by immediately answering one of the questions I posed in the intro. This mask was worn by Empress Elisabeth of Austria, aka Sisi, who reigned from her marriage to Emperor Franz Joseph in 1854 until her assassination in 1898. This video will not only serve as a breakdown of the many masks Sisi wore, but also as a crash course biography. Being one of the most famous people in the history of the world, it's only natural that she's been mythologized, and I want to provide a more truthful summary of her life. Sisi was born in 1837 in Bavaria, now a state of Germany, where she enjoyed a relatively unrestricted childhood for a royal. When she was 15, she traveled to Bad Ischl for her cousin Franz Josef's 23rd birthday celebration. Franz Josef was instantly smitten with her, and the pair were soon engaged. It's a very common claim that the trip was arranged by Sisi's mother Princess Ludovica and Franz Josef's mother Princess Sophie so that Franz Josef would get engaged to Sisi's older sister Helena, but he fell in love with Sisi instead. This is very dramatic, and it makes for a great story, but is it true? I personally couldn't find any primary sources that prove it, and everyone's favorite reliable source, Wikipedia, agrees that it might just be a myth. However, letters written by the two mothers show that they were both doing some meddling to find spouses for their children, so it's at least plausible that they could have been cooking up a marriage between Helena and Franz Josef. In the spring of the next year, Sisi and Franz Josef were married in Vienna. There are more myths surrounding the wedding, with many different sources describing Sisi's wedding dress differently. My personal theory to explain this is that there's confusion caused by the gajillion pre-wedding celebrations where Sisi appeared in different dresses, and people just assumed one or the other was the wedding dress. However, according to the Vienna Museum of Art History, the dress depicted in this portrait is the most likely candidate for Sisi's actual wedding dress. Despite the pomp surrounding the wedding, the marriage was not a happy one. As Sisi would describe it, one is sold as a child at 15, and one takes an oath one does not understand, but can never undo. Later in life, Sisi would encourage Franz Josef to pursue other relationships. I've seen people debate the romantic nature of these relationships, but I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, look at this brooch he gave to actress Katharina Schratt. That's over 300 diamonds. Yes, I counted them all, and no, 300 diamonds is not what you give to just a friend, even if you're an emperor. There are various causes of Sisi's unhappiness in her new marriage. One of the biggest stressors was the fact that Sisi, who was used to freedom, found the responsibilities and etiquette of court life extremely restrictive. As such, she was prone to illness and anxiety attacks. Also, her relationship with her mother-in-law, Princess Sophie, was nothing if not adversarial. Although Sophie's diary entries show that she respected Sisi, the tension between them was clear, especially when it came to the matter of Sisi's children. Sisi, as the empress, was pressured to provide a male heir as soon as possible. She gave birth to her first child, a daughter, at age 17, but Princess Sophie stole the child away from Sisi because she viewed Sisi as an unfit mother. Sophie even named the baby Sophie after herself. When Gisela, Sisi's next child, was born, Sisi finally stood up to her mother-in-law and demanded she be allowed a closer relationship with her children. However, the baby Sophie soon fell sick and died. This distressed Sisi, and she returned Gisela to her mother-in-law's care. Sisi would go on to have 2 more children. Next was Rudolf, her only son and heir apparent to the Austrian throne. Like with her previous 2 children, Sisi was not very involved in Rudolf's life, though now it was due to intentionally keeping herself distant. One notable exception to her absenteeism was when Rudolf was 6 years old. At the time, Rudolf was being subjected to a rigorous and abusive physical education program designed to turn him into the perfect little soldier. Seeing that her son was being tortured, Sisi stepped in and demanded Franz Josef allow her to decide what education Rudolf received. Sisi's final child was Valerie, born a decade after Rudolf, but more on her later. Besides Sisi's family anxieties, another stressor was her obsession with physical beauty. Sisi was famous for her floor-length hair. Various sources describe elaborate hairdressing rituals, including ones in which her hair was washed in eggs and cognac. She was also fixated on thinness. Some people go so far as to retroactively diagnose her with anorexia. I'm not a diagnostician, so I won't say if that's true or not, but she did show symptoms. For one thing, she exercised obsessively, even having gymnastics equipment installed in the palace. For another, she tracked her weight, recording it in a diary. Also, her eating habits were highly unusual and involved periodic fasting. Elisabeth, through her unhealthy habits, starved herself to the point of developing edema. To exaggerate her thinness, Sisi tight-laced her corsets. Different sources give different waist measurements. The smallest I found was a death-defying 16 inches, but the contemporary journalist who wrote that was a critic of tight lacing, so the source has to be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, the current living world record holder is only corseted 1 inch smaller at 15 inches. But whether or not the 16-inch measurement is true, the point is that Sisi starved and corseted herself to extremity. Historian David Kunzle argued that this thinness was a rebellion against the expectation that she remained pregnant, choosing instead to flaunt the thinness of her body. Because of Sisi's obsession with beauty, she took efforts to hide her face from the sun and the public eye as she aged. Beginning around her 30s, she stopped allowing people to take photographs of her and used veils, fans, and parasols as makeshift masks to hide her face. Fans were a popular accessory among royals at the time, though not nearly as popular as the century before, when they had been part of a massive chinoiserie trend. But as much as I've talked about Sisi's life and personality, I've yet to talk about her political beliefs, which were important considering she was an empress. In contrast to her peers at court, Sisi was very progressive. This manifested in sympathy for and interest in the Hungarian people. It was Sisi's pro-Hungarian attitude that led to the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, which not only restored some of the political autonomy that Hungary had lost after a failed revolution in 1848, but also made Sisi into the Queen of Hungary. Sisi's Hungarian sympathies were reflected in the dress she wore during her Hungarian coronation. The gown, designed by famed couturier Charles Frederick Worth, featured a bodice inspired by traditional Hungarian clothing. Worth also designed her famous star gown, shown in this portrait. By the way, I cut a whole tangent here about how one of the hairpins in this portrait was stolen in a jewel heist in 1998. That story doesn't have anything to do with this video, which is why I cut it, but it's fascinating and you should definitely look it up. The other way Sisi's Hungarian sympathies manifested was in her youngest daughter, Valerie. Archduchess Valerie, aka the Hungarian child, was born in Buda rather than Vienna. Also, unlike with her other 3 children, Sisi actually raised Valerie and used their time spent together to force her to speak Hungarian. The Hungarian child was Sisi's obvious favorite. In 1889, Sisi's relationship with her children would be irrevocably changed, but before I tell you about that, let me describe another mask that there's historical evidence of Sisi wearing. In 1874, Sisi secretly attended a masquerade ball with her lady-in-waiting Ida Ferenczi. At the party, she disguised herself in a veiled mask and a yellow domino. A domino is a kind of oversized hooded coat which was popularly worn at masquerades. At the party, Sisi met a man named Fritz with whom she started a friendship. Sisi continued to write to him after their meeting, referring to herself as the Yellow Domino. Sisi would later write a poem about their unique relationship. I did not dare unveil my face to you, but I did show my soul to the light. Friend, that was more, that was more. Years have gone and drawn away, but they will never unite us two again. Much of what we know about Sisi's mental state is inferred from her poetry, which chronicles the good and the bad moments of her life. And no time was worse for Sisi than the death of her son. In 1889, the Austrian court received news that the 30-year-old Crown Prince Rudolf and his 17-year-old mistress Mary Vecera had died in a suicide pact in Mayerling. Adding to the scandal, it was discovered that Rudolf's cousin, the Countess Marie Larisch, had acted as a middleman in the relationship, speaking to one or the other on the other's behalf, giving Vecera letters Rudolf had written, and arranging meetings between the two. These events were known as the Mayerling incident, and in combination with the later death by typhoid of the emperor's younger brother, they made Rudolf's cousin Franz Ferdinand heir presumptive to the throne. Yes, that Franz Ferdinand. After the deaths, the court was looking for someone to blame, and Marie Larisch, as the go-between for the dead couple, was the chosen scapegoat. She was therefore expelled from court. Whether or not she deserved this blame is iffy. Obviously, it's impossible that her actions were the sole cause of Rudolf's death, and she should not be blamed in that sense. His poor health and isolation from his family were more likely contributing factors, and even those explanations are too simplistic. However, even if Larisch should not have been blamed, her actions were not very smart or careful. Also, various contemporary sources claim that she used her situation to shake down Rudolf for money, another possible source of stress. For her part, Larisch denied the extortion allegations in her memoirs, insisting that she took money from Rudolf only to hand it over to Vecera on his behalf. But she's not a very trustworthy source. Larisch largely wrote her memoirs to paint herself in a good light after she was blamed for her cousin's death, so they have to be taken with a grain of salt. This doesn't stop people from repeating Larisch's claims as if they're definitive, though. One example is her description of Sisi's beauty routines, which she may have exaggerated as a way to get revenge against Sisi for her banishment. Still, people parrot Larisch's descriptions as if they are objective evidence of Sisi's behavior, when really, there's no way of knowing if they're fact or fiction. Larisch writes, "Occasionally at night she wore a kind of mask lined inside with raw veal, and in the strawberry season she smeared her face and neck with the crushed fruit. The Empress took warm baths of olive oil, which she believed helped to preserve the suppleness of her figure, but on one occasion the oil was nearly boiling and she narrowly escaped the horrible death associated with many Christian martyrs. She often slept with wet towels around her waist in order to keep its proportions slender, and drank a horrible decoction composed of the whites of 5 or 6 eggs mixed with salt for the same purpose." Similar to the claims made by Larisch, another myth about Sisi is that she made a face cream out of crushed slugs. From what I can tell, this is a misunderstanding of the book Rosebud and Slug Slime, which discusses 19th century cosmetics, including ones made specifically for Sisi by the court apothecary. The recipe that Rosebud and Slug slime contains for Slug pomade is sourced from what's essentially a random cookbook though, not Sisi's recipes, and I think someone at some point just read the book and accidentally conflated the two. However, one true fact from the book is that it shows there's evidence Sisi used strawberries in her toiletries, so there might be some veracity to Larisch's claims about Sisi smearing them on her face. Even after the dust had settled from Rudolph's death, Sisi stayed in a public state of grief, wearing mostly black clothing. One myth is that she only wore black for the rest of her life, though this is untrue, as there's been non-black clothing of hers discovered from after Rudolph's death. Still, she wore a lot of it. This mask was one of the pieces of mourning attire she donned during this period. It's made of velvet and decorated with lace and jet beads. The ensemble was created by Fanny Shiner, a seamstress who also made this chenille dress worn by Sisi. I consider this to be the mask that started World War I, as without Rudolph's death, Franz Ferdinand would never have come to power. There is one more famous mask associated with Sisi and death, but it's one she never wore. In 1898, Sisi was assassinated by the anarchist Luigi Lucchini. He had no issue with her specifically, but rather with the royal class as a whole. As such, when he realized Sisi would be traveling through Geneva, he found her and stabbed her with a metal file. After her assassination, Franz von Matsch, an artist who had painted murals on the wall of Sisi's home in Corfu, sculpted her death mask. Sisi, a woman who had worn masks to hide her face, had her face preserved as a mask forever. But even after Sisi's death, time continued, and the things set in place by her life and family would have worldwide consequences. In 1914, Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, assassinated Franz Ferdinand. Not only did Franz Ferdinand represent the cruelty of the royal class, but it was also only a matter of time until he inherited the throne, and he was a trialist. Trialism was the political belief that the Austro-Hungarian Empire should be split into a third Croatian section. This was unpopular with Serbs who wanted a unified Yugoslavian state. When Franz Ferdinand died, Austro-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and World War I began. Would the war have happened if Rudolph hadn't died? Probably, but the circumstances of the war would have been different. If Rudolph never died, it's possible Franz Ferdinand wouldn't have died either, and the war as we know it wouldn't have happened. But both men did die, World War I did start, and millions of other people died or were injured consequently. As I close out this episode, I want to leave on a note about misinformation. There's so much false information on the topic of Empress Sisi, and it's easy to fall for it since people presenting it believe it to be fact. Also, primary sources on the topic are hard to come by, as many of the letters and diaries written by Austrian historical figures are not digitized and are only available in special archives. I had to take the word of the historians who visited these archives, and now you're taking my word that I'm repeating everything accurately. I leave you, the viewer, with the question of how you can verify the information you hear from others. What are you doing to make sure that the things you hear in a random YouTube video are accurate? Is there anything I forgot to mention on this topic? Which of Sisi's looks are your favorite, and what do you think World War I would have looked like in the alternate history we've constructed? Let me know in the comments. This episode's charity shoutout is Project Heal, an organization dedicated to breaking down systemic, healthcare, and financial barriers to eating disorder healing. Despite the harm that eating disorders can cause, few people receive the help they need. Project Heal is a resource that can help people overcome the various obstacles that prevent access to treatment. A link to donate is in the description.